This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and this is an emergency episode of Rugby Unity because since we recorded the last episode, which has just gone to air, the huge news is that Owen Farrell, perhaps the greatest English rugby union player of all time, will return to international rugby union since taking a break post 2023. Owen Farrell, nominated 3 times as the World Rugby Player of the Year, twice the European Player of the Year. He has won 6 premierships with his club Saracens. He's won 3 European Cups with his club Saracens. He captained England to 3 Six Nations, 3 Triple Crowns, and that is just the tip of the iceberg for this remarkable footballer. Now, there is nobody in the world who is better able to comment about Owen Farrell than my co-host Eddie Jones, who first coached Owen Farrell when he was a 17-year-old at the club Saracens in England. Owen Farrell went on to make his international debut in 2012. He has scored over 1,200 test points in over 100 test appearances. Eddie Jones, this is very, very big news.
Yeah, I've seen it's got a little bit of mixed reaction, which is surprising. You know, as you just said, you know, Owen's one of the most winning players in the world, and his ability to add competitive desire to a team is huge.
Well, we'll get to that, you know, that indifferent sort of response. But perhaps the first question is, Daly, who he replaces, is an outside back, you know, centre wing fullback and playing very well. When you're replacing a player, why then would you go for someone who plays the position 10-12 rather than, you know, outside back?
Well, it would appear, and again, we don't know, but they decided Marcus Smith is going to be best placed at 15. And so there comes a vacancy in that 10 role. All
right, so a redemption story in many, many ways. Let's go back to 2023. It was heartbreaking for me, at least, that, you know, the game had got so on top of Owen and he had so much grief directed his way that he felt that he had to leave the international arena. You know him very, very well. Can you take us back to that period in 2023 as to just exactly where his mindset was and why, in fact, he felt like he had to leave international rugby?
Look, you know, again, I don't know Pemby, but I think he was really disappointed in the reaction of certain fans towards him. You know, he went through that high tackle, how many games type situation, and he was lucky enough to get off. And it didn't get a good reaction from the fans. And then apparently at the games, the fans booed when his name came up, and then English fans joined in, which, you know, it's a bit like COVID, isn't it? It's contagious when people start booing. Yeah. And it affected him pretty badly, you know, and I think probably affected his family more than anything. Yeah, he's a guy who's one of the most loyal and dependable and hard-working players England's had, and he's getting booed by potentially some of his own fans.
Yeah, I don't get that. I don't get that in any way, shape or form, given the contribution that he's made, you know, given that period when he was working with you, the most successful period in English rugby history, when the team equalled the world record for the most successive wins and delivered so much success. But we'll leave that to one side because I want to understand a little bit more about Owen Farrell and what he will bring to the team when he arrives in Sydney later tonight.
Well, he's very single-minded, mate, you know, and I think that always helps the team. Like we've just had Michael Leach come back into the national team after missing most of last season, and he's got the same attributes, you know. He's always thinking what's going to help us win, what's not going to help us win, and those sort of players become an extra coach on the field and therefore invaluable, and no one's exactly like that. You know, he cuts through all the rubbish and just gets to the point of what's going to make us win. we need to practice that more and more.
So if in terms of then coming into a team that's been settled, that's sort of growing, how hard is it to introduce a personality like Owen Farrell, who is a big personality, who is a real winner, who is someone who has known a lot of these players, and I'm sure many of these players have looked up to him over so many years. How hard will it be for the team to be able to bring him in and make him feel part of it, and for him to be able to come in and make a contribution?
So I think at this stage of the tour will be pretty easy, mate. Because they're still developing, they're still mucking around with their teams, and everyone's still scrapping and fighting for a spot. So Owen coming in will just add to that competitiveness. He'll find his spot in the team. He'll know when to talk, when not to talk, know who to talk to and not to talk to. He's been around. When you played 100 tests, you know enough about the team environment to be able to fit in.
So there's obviously the dynamic, the fact that the coach of the team is his father, Andy Farrell. Can you give us any sort of insight into that relationship and how that may, in fact, need to be managed over the next, few weeks as they work together to deliver a successful series for the British and Irish Lions?
Yeah, I think, it's a little bit like in the NRL at the moment, Ivan Cleary and Nathan Cleary. They're both winners. They both want to win. And when they're in the team environment, it'll be Owen the coach, Owen the player, and Andy the coach. And, they might have moments outside of that with their father and son, but it'll be very much a coach-player relationship. And, they're both really good at that. I remember the first time with the Sarries going back, Owen just came into the squad. He was 17. And we were playing a trial game against the Force, and both Andy and Owen were on the bench. And we were going to put Owen on ahead of Andy because they were both inside centres, right? And anyway, Owen had to go to the toilet, so Andy went on. And within a minute, he cracked his thumb, was out for 6 or 8 weeks. So it would have been an interesting family dinner that night.
So in terms then of the leadership of the British and Irish Lions team, the captain is Maro Itoje. And again, Maro Itoje is someone who has played his entire career with Owen Farrell at Saracens and England. What is their relationship like?
They got a good working relationship. They're completely different sort of blokes, but they'll work well together. And I think, Owen can provide Murrow with a bit of a second set of eyes, which will be useful. I'm sure Murrow will go to Owen at various stages and ask him what he thinks. He's a very intelligent young man, Murrow, so I think that can only help Murrow in his captaincy.
So then, really, you see it obviously as a massive positive for the British and Irish Lions that they get the services, as I say, of one of the most experienced and possibly the best player that England ever produced.
Yeah, look, I can only see it as a positive, and particularly I think they've made the decision Marcus is going to be a 15, which creates that opportunity for a third choice 10, which basically Owen comes in, underneath Finn Russell and Finn Smith, and he's a pretty handy number 3. Say for instance, in the first test, you need to play him off the bench and there's a big kick at the end of the game. Well, who would you want taking that kick?
Oh, yeah.
Just have a look at that simple equation and that gives you a pretty good answer.
Yeah. Certainly, through that period where we were involved with England over those many years, he was one of those players, wasn't he? Sort of George Gregan-like in his absolute intensity around winning rugby, influencing and making it all about what, as you say, what is better for the team, what is going to help the team to win. He didn't take up the opportunity, or I don't know even if the invitation was there from Steve Borthwick to join the England team in Argentina. Do you know, can you give us any insight into perhaps why he said no or didn't go to Argentina, but when he's been asked to come to Australia for the British Irish Lions, he probably couldn't get to the airport fast enough?
Yeah, I'm not sure of the mechanics of that because, initially he was obviously eligible because he was playing in France, and because he signed with Saracens, maybe he became eligible. Maybe Steve had already penciled in his squad at that stage. And, he's got George Ford there as captain, who's remarkably playing his 100th test on the weekend as well.
Well, isn't that great? And a shout out to George Ford, his family and everybody else, because again, like Owen Farrell, he was always one of those guys that if you saw him in the squad, if you saw him on the team sheet, you always knew what you were going to get. And again, another winner and another great player for England over many, many years. So, Eddie Jones, just a final word then about the news about Owen Farrell. How would you summarise it as an impact on this tour of the British and Irish Lions to Australia?
Well, first thing, if you just look at his record, look at his batting record in Australia, I think he's played 6 tests for 5 wins. Don't get a better CV than that. He'll come in and bolster the Lions side, and you can understand why people might be upset about, a Blair Murray or a Jordan from Scotland missing out. But, he's going to bring incredible experience, a winning history in Australia, and he'll just add to the depth of the Lions team.
All right. Well, thank you, Eddie Jones, at short notice being able to take us a call from us. It is a travel day for you in Japan as you head towards the venue of the Test match against Wales. So thank you so much for being available. And there we go, audience. What huge news. It's fantastic, isn't it? We were only in the last podcast talking about there wasn't enough going on. There wasn't enough tension. There wasn't enough news. But here we go. Here's some huge news that Owen Farrell, as I say, probably the greatest player that England has ever produced, joins the British and Irish Lions, joins his father. Another great storyline there, but certainly brings in, as Eddie Jones says, that competitor, that warrior, that person who really single-mindedly is going to go to work to do everything he possibly can to improve the British and Irish Lions. So exciting times for the tour. It's great news, but fantastic. And again, big thanks to Eddie for being available at short notice. But for the moment, everyone, please be kind to each other. I'm David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.